Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's episode, we're going to be creating this Snowball Projectile visual effect using the powerful Niagara System in Unreal Engine. We're going to elevate our effect by using multiple emitters and some custom textures for the materials. The textures I've created for this tutorial are available for free download on my Patreon page. You can find the link in the description, so feel free to grab those files and follow along in the video. If you'd rather use your own textures or placeholders, that's absolutely fine too. For those who want to dive a bit deeper or simply save some time, the complete project files for this tutorial will also be available for download on my Patreon, exclusively to Patreon subscribers. Don't forget to give this video a like if you do find it helpful, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future content. So let's go ahead and get started. To begin with, I'm going to import my textures that I'll be using for this project from my materials. Again, these textures will be available for download on my Patreon, so for free. So feel free to go ahead and grab those. Let's go ahead and dive into the materials. I want to kind of speed through this. I'm still going to kind of explain things as we go, but trying to be a little quicker. Let's go ahead and right click and do a material. This first one, I'm going to do M snowflakes. And let's go ahead and open that up. And for the snowflakes, let's do a texture sample. And let's set that texture sample to our snowflake vectors. This is a 4x4 UVs here, 4x4, and we're going to use this the sub UVs to give us different snowflakes. Off of our red, I'm going to do a multiply. I want to grab a particle color. Off the RGB here, I'm going to multiply that with the red off the texture sample. Let's change our material, highlight this, and then go over to blend mode and do translucent and then unlit. This first one's going to go into the emissive color, and then we're going to take the red here and we're going to plug directly into our opacity, and that'll give us our snowflakes. That's our first material, and that's all we need to do in here. So we can go ahead and save that and close it down. Next, let's do our second material. We're going to right click material and let's call this one snow effects and open that up. So in the snow effects, one, let's set this to the same translucent and unlit. And then for this, let's grab a texture sample. We're going to set this to smoke. Smoke, not smoke 2. And then from here, let's come down and grab a radial gradient. We're going to come off the red of this texture and do a multiply with the radial gradient. Let's go ahead and grab a particle color here. And off of this alpha, we're going to do another multiply. And this is going to multiply with the product of these two. And this is going to plug into our opacity. And then we're also going to come off of this multiply here and say multiply again. And we're going to multiply with the RGB off this one and plug that into emissive color. And that's what our material is going to look like. I'll try to fix this before I put the files in Patreon and get rid of this circle here. Off of our texture sample UVs here, let's come off and get a panner. And then we're going to do text chords. This we're going to do a multiply, and I want to plug this into my coordinate here. And we're going to multiply this by our dynamic parameter here. And this is so that we can use this and change these parameters inside of our Niagara system. So this first one, expand this, and I'm going to rename this to just pan speed. Or sorry, not pan speed. This one will be tiling. The next one will be speed. And then we're also going to use number 3 here for the density of our radial gradient. So I'm going to grab the density and plug it into density down here. And then I'm just going to plug this speed directly into speed here. You could use an append and control them separately and use another parameter here, but I'm going to just get a kind of a diagonal motion here. And that's all we're going to do in this material. So we can go ahead and close this one down. Next, we're going to do one more material. Right click material, and I want to call this ice. And let's open that one up. And for this one, I'm going to hold 4 and click to get a constant, and we can use it as a color. And I want to do the same thing right below it. I'm going to set this first color to this teal here. The next color, I'm going to set to white. Then I'm going to lerp between these two colors. So I'm going to do a lerp. And what we're going to use for the alpha here is a Fresnel. And this is a pretty cool node here that'll give you some one color on the outside and the other will kind of be faded on the inside. And you can get some pretty cool looks with that. I'm going to set this to 2 here and leave the base reflection where it is. This output is going to plug directly into base color. And then you'll kind of see what this looks like. You get that white on the outside and the blue on the inside. And changing this exponent makes that harder, or the higher it is, the harder that cutoff is. So you get less white on the outside. And if you go real short here or real small here, you get more white. So now you get this tiny little blue here, and going in between, it fades it out. But I'm going to stick with 2. That's where I want this. And you can add these all to parameters so that you can affect them inside of your Niagara system as well, but I'm not going to do that. From here on metallic, I want to get a constant. And I'm going to set this to 0.4 to get kind of a metallic shine to it. Then off of roughness, I'm going to do another constant, and I'm going to leave this at 0 so that there's no roughness. And I'm going to come off of this lerp and do a multiply, if I could type. And this I'm going to plug into the emissive color. And I'm going to multiply this by maybe 2, but that's another one that you can adjust to get some different color on. And that's going to do it for this material. And we can go ahead and close that one down. So now that we have our 3 materials here, we can go ahead and start working on our Niagara system. So I'm going to right click and click Niagara system. And I'm just going to do an empty system here. And let's name this ice projectile. And get that opened up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the emitter state as system here. Start with properties. I want to check local space here and requires persistent IDs. I don't need a script category. I don't think that would hurt anything, but I'm going to go ahead and remove it. Under my emitter update, Let's add a spawn burst instantaneous so it comes up immediately. I want to change this from a sprite renderer to a mesh renderer. And let's open that up. And I'm going to change this from this little geometry thing, and I'm going to do a, for now, actually, let me do a cube. Actually, I'm not going to do a cube. I went ahead and imported this sphere here into my project, so I'll make sure this is also free inside of that Patreon file if you want to grab one if you don't have one in your own project. But you could always replace this with a rock or something and use the same ice material to make it look like a kind of a ice rock or something. So I'm going to select here that sphere. I'm going to do enable material override, and I'm going to add one to this array and open that up. And I'm going to use that ice material here for that. So now we have our ice ball here. We zoom into it, we can see it. I'm also going to add a light renderer. And for the light renderer, I want this to be really emissive. So I'm going to, for now, do 40,000 on both of these to get that kind of teal blue. We'll see that in the actual world when we start it. So let's go to our spawn particle and do initialize particle. For now, I want to set this to like 20. For color mode, I'm not going to mess with this right here. You can do direct set and just leave it where it's at. For mask mode, again, this really doesn't matter, but you might end up using it for your collisions or hitting things or moving them. So you can add your mask mode here. For my mesh scale mode, I'm going to do uniform, and I want this to be kind of small here. For in my particle update, I'm going to add a scale mesh size. And on this, I'm going to change this to a multiply vector by float. And this I'm only doing so if you wanted to set this to a user parameter and you could change how big this is inside of your actor. You could always come down and do a user parameter here. I'm not going to do that, but I might come back and affect this later. But for now, I'm just going to leave this at 1, just kind of showing where you can change the size of this in the update. It'll change it while it's alive. And I'm going to go ahead and add a solve forces, even though we're not really using it yet, but just to give you something that if you do add gravity or a velocity, it's already in there. And we can delete this for now. I'm going to rename this emitter to projectile. Then I'm going to go ahead and right click and add a new emitter from empty. I'm going to rename this one to small flakes. This one, the emitter state is going to go to self, and then I'm going to leave it at infinite. And I'm going to give this a spawn rate. And for the spawn rate, I'm going to jump this to like 50. And if you go to click the sprite renderer here, we're going to select that snowflake there, that snowflake material. And this is what we'll get. And we just want to select one of these at a time. So I'm going to, in the particle update here, do a sub UV animation. Oh, in your sprite renderer, before I forget, come down to your sub UV section here and do a 4x4, and you'll get just one of these at a time. And then for a sub UV animation, since we don't want to just do this same snowflake every single time, we're going to come over to this, change it to direct index. Make sure under source you select sprite renderer. And for direct frame index, we're going to change this to random range float. And this is going to be a range from 0 to 15, since there are 16 of these. And then we'll start to see different snowflakes pop up instead of just that same one. The next thing we want to do, go to your initialize particle. We're going to do a random here and do 0.2 to 1.2. I'm going to direct set this color, and I want to do something like 100 and 100. Same thing with mask mode. You don't have to mess with it. I'm not going to mess with this one. Likely wouldn't be using it to interact with anything. For the sprite size mode, I'm going to set to random uniform, and I'm going to leave that at 5 to 10. Next, I'm going to add in the particle spawn a shape location, and I'm going to give this a sphere of about 50. So now you see all of our snowflakes just kind of randomly appearing outside of this. In the particle update, let's do a scale mesh size. And you can kind of do whatever you want with this. I'm going to use this as where I'm affecting my overall size of this. So I'm going to do a multiply vector by float, and I'm just going to do 0.7 here. But again, you can set that to a user value or have it scale with the overall, however you want to do it. Back in the particle update, I'm here going to do a gravity force and make sure you fix that issue. And for this, I'm going to do a random range vector. I only want this going down, and I want them actually falling pretty quick. So I want to do like a negative 5,000 and 0, 0 down to 10,000 here. The next thing I'm going to do is add a vortex velocity. And I want this to have a pretty strong vortex amount, so I'm going to go 5,000 here. And I only want it in the going around the y-axis, so I want to go 1y, 0, z, and x, and you're getting this kind of little curve here. Set this to the simulation vortex axis. And the rest of this should be good. The final thing, let's make sure that our sub-UVs are good, and I believe they are. Okay, so I'm going to now right-click at another emitter here, an empty one, and I'm going to name this Big Flakes. Inside my Big Flakes, under emitter state, going to do self, leaving it at infinite, and initialize particle. Let's do a random here, and I want to do this between 0.5 and 1. Direct set here, but we're going to change this elsewhere. Again, same thing with mask mode. I'm not going to do anything with that. In my sprite size mode here, random uniform, and I want to do this between 2 and 10. And then sprite rotation, I'm going to do random. You can actually do, if we go to the small flakes as well, we can set that random as well. So I want to do that just to get some more random variation in our animations here. And if we don't like how it looks, we can always change it back. So that's going to be it for the initialized particle. Next, let's do an add velocity inside the particle spawn. Make sure you fix that issue. And this velocity, I'm going to do a from point, and let's do a random range. Um, let's see. Oh, do linear and then do random range vector. And I want to do 10, 10, 0, -10, -10, and 10 here. Oh, actually, let's also do, we're going to use those same snowflakes for this. So go to your sprite renderer and let's select those snowflakes. And again, in your sub UV section, do 4 and 4 there. And then let's do, in our particle update, let's go ahead and grab that sub UV animation. And here we're going to do a direct index. Make sure under source is sprite renderer. And in your direct frame index, let's do that random range float. And again, we're going to go 0 to 15. And for the initialized particle in here, I'm going to go 2 to 20 instead. And then in your particle spawn, let's do a shape location. And this is going to be a sphere. And let's just do 30. And I did forget in the emitter update, let's add a spawn rate. That's why I'm not seeing this. So do a spawn rate here. And for the spawn rate, I'm going to do 30 for this as well. So now we can see our big flakes coming in. In particle update, let's go ahead and start with the gravity force and do that random range vector in here. And I'm only going to have this going in the z direction, so I'm going to do -25 and -100 and the rest zeros. So they're only coming down, but kind of slowly and kind of different speeds. Let's add a curl noise here. For the curl noise, I'm going to do 200. Let's go ahead and change the color. For the color, I want to change this to color from curve. And for this first color here, I'm going to double click that to get it to open up and use kind of this teal blue here. For the next color, kind of use a lighter teal blue. And then I'm going to change my alphas on the bottom here. I'm going to have these start at 0. And then they're going to go probably about half, maybe 3/4 of the way. Let's have it go to like 0.3. And this one should be 0. And let's actually make this like a darker blue. Maybe not that blue. I think that looks all right. Next, let's do a scale sprite size. And I want to do this ease in. So I think that looks pretty good there. Let me look and see if I'm missing it. Let's do a sprite rotation rate and just give this a number. You can do a random range vector or a random range float and have it go both directions, but I'm just going to leave this at 100 for now. And I think that looks pretty good there. We can always come back and change these as always. I want to right click, do another emitter from empty. And I'm going to call this one smoke. Again, the emitter state's going to be self and infinite. Let's do a spawn rate here. And again, do something like 30. Let's click the sprite renderer here, and we want this to be the snow smoke material. Oh, it looks like I did forget to make snow smoke. So let's go back and make our snow smoke. Let's go ahead and right click, do a material here, and I'm naming this snow smoke. Same thing here. I'm going to do a blend mode is translucent and unlit. Let's start up here. I'm going to do a texture sample, a radial gradient, and I'm going to plug the RGB into the UVs here. And off my density, I'm going to hold one and click and plug this in. I don't plan on changing this in mine, but you can always set this to a parameter to change. But I'm going to set this density to 2 for now. I'm going to keep this one. It's going to be kind of lengthy, but I'm going to try to do it real simple. Off these UVs, actually, let's set this to that smoke texture first. Off these UVs, I want to do a panner. And I'm going to grab off coordinates. I want to do a text chords here and plug this in. And for these text chords, I'm actually going to expand this. I'm going to keep U 1, so it's going to maintain its width like that. But we'll change the V to 0.2. And then I'm going to, on the speed, I'm just going to give this 0.5 in the Y direction. And that's all I'm going to do for this portion of this. From here, I'm going to come off of this alpha and come down and do a multiply. I'm going to speed this up, I'm going to select these here, and I'm going to copy and paste them down here because I want to use them both. For this texture sample, we're going to use Smoke 2. I'm going to come off of here and do an add, but you could always just adjust your tiling separately. But if you do this, you can set this to a parameter later as well and affect it there. But I'm going to set the U to 3 and the V to 2. And I'm just going to add 1 to these like that. Same thing here. But for this U and V, I'm going to set these, keep them at 1 for now. And they'll become 2. For the speed on this top one, let's do negative 0.2, and 0.1. And then down here, I'm going to do 0.1 and 0.1. You don't have to use these same numbers. This is just what I used for mine. The next thing I want to do is grab red here, and I'm actually going to add these two together. And I'm going to come off of this add here into this multiply. Off of my radial gradient, I'm going to do another multiply. And this is plugging into this one. The next thing that I want to do is come off of or grab a particle color here. And there's a lot of ways you can do this. This is just how I did it for this instance, but I want to come off this RGB here. And again, going to add it. And I'm going to add that off this multiply here and plug this into emissive. You can kind of see it flying through there. Off of this alpha, I'm going to come down, see, and do another multiply. Now I want to plug this multiply back into there. That's the multiply from this top one and then the sum of these two. From here, I'm going to do a radial gradient again. I'm going to hold 1 and click and get a constant here. Plug this into the density. And I want to turn it to 0.8, but we might need to adjust that in a moment. And then I want to come off of this multiply and do another multiply. I'm going to multiply that with the radial gradient. And then this will get plugged into our opacity and see what we look like. So there's our smoke, kind of what we want this to look like. It doesn't have to look just like mine, and we can always adjust the density and all kinds of things to make this look slightly different. But that's all I want to do here. Let me get some screenshots here in case you need to pause it and catch up. And then there's the final area of it. So we can go ahead and close this down now. And then here under the smoke and the sprite renderer, we want to set this to that snow smoke that we just created. And then we see that smoke here. Next, let's go to initialize particle. We're going to do a random for life, and I want to do this between 0.5 and 1. Again, we can do a direct set on the color, but I think we're actually going to change this later, so you don't have to do that one. Same thing with mask, not really going to use it. For a sprite size mode, let's do random uniform. And I want to make these actually kind of pretty big. I want to do 80 and 100 for now. Then let's do an add velocity. Go ahead and fix that issue. And again, going to do random range vector here. And I want to do 10, 10, 0, negative 10, negative 10, 10. Let's see if I want to. Yeah, for sprite rotation mode, let's go ahead and do random on that as well to get the random rotation there. That's pretty good. See, I think this is probably good here for now. Actually, I wonder if we multiply vector by float. No, let's leave it how we had it. We'll have to come and adjust this here in a little bit. to get it where we want it. Let's end the particle update at a gravity force. Again, change this to random range vector. We're going to go 0 minimums, 0x max, 0y max, and then negative 100 here, just to get the smoke to kind of fall down. Then let's do a color. And the color, again, going to change this to color from curve. And going to choose kind of that same little setup that we did a bit ago. Slightly darker blue here. And for this one, still starting the opacity at 0. But for the next one, let's do it a lot closer here and have it go to 0.4. And then about halfway, let's do one at 0.2 and then have it fall off to 0 at the end. In particle update, let's also do a scale sprite size. And let's do that ease in again there. We might come adjust the smoke. That still looks kind of big here. So we'll see what that looks like once we get our actual effect or projectile working. The next thing, I'm just going to jump over and right click add emitter, empty, and rename this. This is also going to be a smoke trail, but let's call this smoke 2. Probably should have named this one smoke 1 for um, keeping things consistent. Emitter state, still doing self and infinite. For the spawn rate, let's add a spawn rate here. And this is going to be 100. In the sprite renderer, let's change this to that's no smoke as well. Actually, let's turn one of these. One of these needs to be, I think it was this one, not snow smoke. Let's do the snow smoke effect. I have these backwards. This one's going to be snow smoke, and this one is going to be the snow effects. Yeah, so that should look like that. And then for this one, let's work on it. Let's go to initialize particle. Let's do random here and doing 0.2 to 0.5. Direct set color, but not going to use it. You can always change it or start it somewhere here. I don't know why I do it. We don't really need to do it. Scale sprite size, do random uniform, and let's go 40 to 50. For sprite rotation mode, let's select random there. And then for that's all for that. Let's go ahead and do an add velocity here and fix that. Same thing here, going to do random range vector and going to do 10, 10, 0, negative 10, negative 10, 10. Let's add that gravity force in as well and change this to random range vector. 0, 0, let's do 100 and then 0, 0 to negative 100. Let's add a curl noise. And for this, let's go 550. So that looks pretty good. Let's do a color for this as well. and change this to color from curve. And this is going to be the same setup as the other smoke there. So this kind of teal here, go into a darker blue. The first one's going to be at 0. Add a key here and double click that. We'll do 0.4 there. About halfway, do another one at 0.2. And we'll just keep it like that for now. And then final thing, let's do a scale sprite size. And for the scale sprite size, I want a linear ramp down. So that's all we're going to do in here. That looks all right. May need to mess with these smokes a little bit. But for now, let's jump back over to our content browser. And I'm going to right click, do a blueprint, and let's make this an actor. And I'm just going to name this BP Projectile. And then let's open that up. In your default scene root, let's add that Niagara particle system there. And from here, I'm going to, in the detail panel, I'm going to add that ice projectile. And I'm going to check auto activate off. I also want to come over to this and click and add a projectile movement. Then let's jump over to the event graph. And I'm going to just do this in the event play. The way we're going to spawn this is by spawning an actor from this class. So when that actor gets spawned, this event play is going to start. So let's grab our Niagara system and come off of it and say set active. And let's check new active here. The next thing we need to do is grab our projectile movement. And let's come off of that. And we're going to say set gravity scale. We're going to leave this at 0 so that our particle doesn't fall. Off of projectile movement, let's grab a set velocity. Go ahead and check that. And we actually won't need this here unless you're going to set it up for on specific blueprints that aren't being activated by something. You would set it and it can auto set. But for now, I'm just going to leave these at 0. And then we'll change this velocity inside of our third person character. So now jump over to whichever character you're going to call this in. I'm going to open up this third person character. And for this, I'm going to tie this to a keyboard input, but actually I'm going to set it to right mouse button. Off of this, when this is pressed, I'm going to come off and say spawn actor from class. And that class is going to be this blueprint projectile here. So let's look that up. We need to give this a transform here. I'm going to split this struct. And the reason I want to do that is I'm actually going to grab this capsule component off of our player. And off this, I want to say get world transform. And I want this one out of the transform category. And I'm going to split this struct. And the reason I'm splitting it is because we're going to use this rotation separately. But for now, I can plug these in here. And then off this rotation, I'm going to come down and I'm going to say get forward vector. And we may need we're actually going to do a multiply here, and I'm going to multiply all these by 1,000 so that whatever direction this is facing, it'll multiply the coordinates accordingly. Out of this blueprint projectile, out of the return here, I'm going to say projectile movement, and I'm going to get that. And here I'm going to say set velocity. And then I'm just going to plug this in right here. And I believe that's all we need. So let's go test this out. If I run, now whenever I right click, I'm getting that projectile there. So that's working how we wanted it to. Some things we can do, we can change that smoke around. I'm not really happy with the smoke, so that's going to need some customizing. I'll definitely put my customized and fine-tuned version in my Patreon for download if you want to download those. Some other things you can do is you can add some customization to the Niagara system itself to where on collisions it maybe has some ice burst or does something on impact, and that's it. Real quick, I'm going to let's change this so we can see this a little slower. There, they're traveling a little slower, and we can make it even faster. And they fire as quick as you can press it. So highly customizable. Change it however you want it. You got these little snowflakes all over. So I actually changed the smoke one back to the snow smoke for the material. I kind of like that look better, so I went ahead and made that change. This is the final product. I scaled the ball up a little bit, and I'll make some more tweaks, and that'll be in my file in my Patreon for Patreon members. So be on the lookout for that if you're interested. If not, you can always make your own custom adjustments to this as you want. And that's going to do it for this episode where we created this pretty cool little snowball projectile. I hope this tutorial was informative and fun. Remember, you can download the textures used in this video for free on my Patreon page. The link is in the description. Also, the entire project file for this tutorial is available on Patreon to exclusive subscribers. It's a great way to dive deeper into the project or simply save some time. If you found this tutorial helpful, please do give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Your support here and on Patreon helps me continue creating these tutorials and sharing my knowledge with this incredible community. If you're working on any cool projects using this effect, I'd like to see them. Feel free to share them in the comments or on my social media platforms. Thanks for joining me today. As always, happy developing, and I'll see you in the next one.